Just before we get into Barbieheimer, it is, and I know you were alluding to this right at the beginning of our podcast, is that it is. Do you think it's a mistake that both these movies are coming out at the same time?
It's a coincidence, but there have been discussions about, do you have to go one, you have to go see the other, and of course you can go see both. It's fine. And so on the one hand, you can say, well, it just makes people excited about going to the cinema. On the other hand, if you are running a cinema, it's kind of helpful if the big blockbusters arrive in 3-week, gap, because then you can ride the wave a little bit easier. It is weird. It's been a difficult year for cinema owners, and this is great. But if it would be greater if they were spread out.
Okay. Well, we'll spread them out. We'll put Oppenheimer shortly. First of all, we're going to talk Barbie. And you'll hear Mark's review after you've heard my conversation with Greta Gerwig, which is coming along after this clip.
Hey. What's cooking good looking?
Hi.
Welcome. Welcome to my weird house. What can I do you for?
I just had to come see you about my feet. They're,
Flat.
Yeah.
Never seen that before.
Really?
Whoa.
What do I have to do?
You have to go to the real world. You can go back to your regular life and forget any of this ever happened. Or you can know the truth about the universe.
The first one. The high heel.
No. We'll do a redo. You're supposed to want to know.
And that is a clip from Barbie, as I think you probably realized. And I'm delighted to say its director and co-writer, Greta Gerwig, is with us. Hello, Greta.
Hello.
How are you feeling now that all your work is done and it's about to be unleashed? You've been working on this for a while. Are you nervous? Are you anxious?
Yes, I'm extremely nervous and extremely anxious. I'm also grateful. It's been really just a joy to bring it to people and sit. I sat with the audience a few nights ago in Los Angeles, and it just, we made it for people, so we want it to be in cinemas. But at the same time, it's you're letting go of something. It's not mine anymore. I also can't control it anymore, which is very difficult for me. But I'm excited, but I'm also anxious.
And does the story start with Margot Robbie approaching you? Is that the beginning of your involvement?
Yes, she approached me as a writer, and then I brought on Noah Baumbach, who's my partner in life and art. And so initially it was a writing project. And
what did she say?
She said, my company and Warner Brothers, we have the rights to Barbie. They'd like to make it into a movie. Do you want to write it? And I guess I said yes. It's actually hard to remember now because I had a newborn baby when that started, and I have a newborn baby again now. And it's very hard to construct your mindset in the 2 months after having a baby. You're sort of like, I don't know what I was thinking exactly, but something in me thought it might be interesting. And
so there wasn't a story. She didn't come to you with a story.
No,
she said, let's begin at the beginning. It's Barbie.
She said, it's Barbie. What do you want to do? And I said, give me about a year and I'll think of something.
And so that seems like it's quite a jump from Little Women. And one of the things that's come up a lot in all the movies that we're talking about is lockdown and COVID and the effect of that on film production, but also in story writing. Because if I've got this right, you and Noah wrote this during lockdown.
We did, yeah.
Do you think that's obvious when we go and see the movie?
I don't think it's obvious in any sort of
Is it more unhinged, I guess, is what I'm
Yes,
thinking.
well, it definitely is more unhinged, but I don't think it's, I think as soon as you say it, when you see the movie, you're like, oh, I could see why that was the case. I mean, I think a lot of it is just what I was sort of saying at the top was we missed going to the movie theater. We love going to the movie theater. And I think part of it was fueled by this sense of, well, if we ever get back there, let's just do the craziest, most outrageous thing we can think of. And I think it freed us up too, because, nothing was getting made for a moment. Nothing was being released. And everybody's sort of response of like, well, they'll never let you make this. And I was like, well, they're already not making movies. Why don't they not make this one too? And that was kind of allowed us to be anarchic and wild.
And at what stage did you think, I want to direct this? Fine, I can write it, but really, this is my film.
After the script was written. I mean, for me, once we had the script, that was when I wanted to direct it, because for me, I think the idea of directing a Barbie movie wasn't that interesting to me. It was directing this Barbie movie. And it made it very simple in a way, because if they didn't want to do it, then I didn't need to make a Barbie movie. So I felt less pressure maybe than you might if you really wanted to just do any Barbie movie. But when it came down to changing stuff or making things different, it was really like, well, I don't need to do this. If you don't want to do it this way, I don't have any interest in it. And so that was kind of it. I think it emboldened everybody.
And I'm intrigued as to, obviously you can't, give anything away, but the conversations with Mattel, because obviously Barbie's owned by Mattel.
Yeah.
Mattel come out of this not very well, really. And I wonder if the Lego movie was kind of like a touchstone here. You just say, we are going to make fun of you. We are going to point out the kind of uncomfortableness of some of Barbie's history. Right. You got to go along with that. Yes,
they definitely had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I'd say. But the proof is in the pudding. They did it. But I think it took a minute to wrap their heads around it. But I think we just felt like the fact that it is a doll made by a corporation and that it's a doll with this complex history, if we deny that, then what are we doing?
And when you say complex history, what do you mean?
Well, I mean the sort of history of Barbie where, Barbie, if she were a real woman, couldn't stand up, because physically it would be impossible. And so we're holding her up to be a physical ideal, and yet she would be completely non-functional as a human being. I think that is sort of the initial kind of seed of the complaint about Barbie. And then, sometimes she's been ahead of culture and sometimes she's been behind culture. I think that that's what made her so fascinating, is that she went to the moon before women could have credit cards, but she also is embodied in proportions that are physically unsustainable.
As part of explaining the story, there's just one scene which actually isn't fundamental to the story, but I wonder if it explains what you're trying to do. There's a scene when Barbie has left Barbie Land, which is sort of like a Garden of Eden, really. Yeah. And you've gone to Venice Beach, which is probably like the most Barbie kind of place that you could think of. And she finds herself looking at an old woman, or an older woman, which she hasn't seen before. Yes. Can you just explain that scene and why it was important?
Yeah, well, she looks at a woman who is actually a friend of mine, a brilliant costumer, Anne Roth. I think she was 91 when we shot that. And she's looking great. And she was a costumer of such, she did the costumes for Midnight Cowboy and Clute. I mean, she's the legend. I think she's one of the oldest people to ever win an Oscar recently. Anyway, she's fabulous, and I had to really promise to have a lot of martinis with her to get her to do this movie. But, Barbie's sort of looking around at the world and then looks at her and takes her in, and she's never seen aging before, and she's struck by her, and she says, "You're so beautiful." And Anne, as this woman says, "I know it." And it's such a wonderful moment because, A, Anne is fabulous, and B, is just this kind of connection through time. And I think one thing I'm always interested in as a filmmaker is women talking to each other through generations. I think that's fascinating to me. And then, it's this first glimmer of humanity, of with idealization of, a kind of oh, this is the ideal way that someone looks or is, or even with optimization of we're going to make you better, stronger, faster. There's kind of this hysteria around maximizing everything. And I think sometimes the part where you age or things break down isn't without its own beauty. I always think of the paintings that, Monet made when his sight was going. Unbelievably beautiful. So I don't know that everything always has to be optimized.
Was it always going to be Ryan Gosling for Ken?
Always it was going to be Ryan Gosling. There was no other person. It was written for him. I don't think he believed me when I first told him that. I think he thought that was just a thing I was saying, but it was true. I couldn't imagine anyone else.
He's very funny.
He's incredible.
I didn't realize quite how funny he could be.
I actually did somehow. I don't know why I knew that. I mean, he's been very funny. He hosted SNL a few times, and I thought, oh, he's a secret funny person.
Who's your target audience, do you think?
I'd like everyone to be my target audience.
I was struck. We had an email on the program from a father who'd taken his 6-year-old daughter to see Elemental, the new Pixar film, and a trailer came up for your movie, which had some of the beach jokes in there, and he thought, okay, well, it's not for her. Right.
Well, I think I would say that there's definitely a lot of different jokes that cut in a lot of different directions. There's nothing that's scandalous. I mean, I also think I have a 13-year-old stepson, and I've been watching movies with him for a long time, and he's certainly seen lots of cities destroyed and lots of superhero movies, and I figure if you can watch a city destroyed, you can certainly hear some jokes.
Yeah. Can I ask you about the strikes, because you're a union member, and the Screen Actors, as we speak, the Screen Actors Guild are on strike, the writers are on strike. I was wondering quite whether all the promotion for Barbie would go ahead. Where it's a difficult situation, isn't it, for your industry at the moment?
Well,
and for you?
Well, I'm a 3 guild member. I'm a member of Screen Actors Guild, the Directors Guild, and the Writers Guild. So, two of my guilds are on strike. I support them 100%. I mean, everything stopped. I'm here as a director because the directors made a deal, and everything sort of ground to a halt. And I think it's a moment of massive change, and I think there needs to be, obviously writers, actors, there needs to be a living wage, and also there need to be protections of, all these things that are changing just honestly before our eyes in terms of what the capabilities of AI and everything else are, which I feel like I learn about daily.
Well, Simon Pegg last week, we were talking about his Mission Impossible film, but we were talking about AI there, and although his movie is about AI,
right.
In your industry, it's clearly seen as something to be extremely worried about.
I mean, I guess I was actually just saying this in the hallway. I do feel like every day I find out what it does or can do because it keeps changing. I mean, I think it's something where, I don't quite know what to say about what it is. I mean, why I engage with art is because I want to see something that was made by another human being or a group of human beings, and kind of that they in some way are saying, here is how it looks to us, whether it's, making a song or writing a poem or making a movie. It's like from that vantage point and the specificity of that. And I think now where it gets confusing, and I don't have an answer for it, and I don't think anybody else does, is, but if these models, these AI models are trained on everybody, do they have all our souls already? I don't know. I really don't know the answer to this, and I don't think anybody does. So I couldn't tell you, but it's something where I think in the meantime, having protections and guardrails around industries are important as it develops, and then we'll see sort of where we end up. But I think that the last time there were a lot of strikes, they didn't even have a word for streaming. They called it, I believe, like new media. And it was important that they established some guardrails around this new media because, obviously it's wound up somewhere very specific. And I think, the guilds are always good at looking ahead and saying like, well, why don't we create some language here so that we're not just willy-nilly, letting our members and our workers go unprotected.
Greta Gerwig, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was being told to stop.
You get somebody doing the windmill thing.
Yeah. Being told to stop. But all that last answer, I think what you heard was a fantastic film director and writer really struggling with where we are.
Yes.
And as she said, I don't know what the answers are, but it's clearly that answer put next to Simon Pegg's answer last week means this is an industry which is in turmoil, too strong a word?
No, I think turmoil is right. I think
chaos.
it's the pieces are all up in the air, and nobody's quite sure how they're going to fall.
Anyway, but it was one of those where the person running the interview junket thing wanted it to stop, but Greta was speaking. I didn't ask any other questions. I had loads of other questions. I wanted to know what she's working on next and all this kind of stuff. Didn't get there because that was the answer that she gave us. We're talking about AI. Anyway, that's all very interesting, but Barbie is certainly everywhere. What do you think?
Well, The first thing I'd say is one of the things you say in that interview is that Mattel don't come out of it very well. I think they do.
Well,
but let me be clear by this. What I mean is, I think they should be absolutely ecstatic, because essentially what the film has done is to reinvent and rehabilitate Barbie in a way that I don't know that another version of this film would do. When Greta Gerwig said, I wanted to make this Barbie movie, not any other Barbie movie, and the position was, well, if you don't want to make this Barbie movie, get someone else to do it, was really, really telling. Because you spoke in that interview, terrific interview, and she's great questions, and she's a really smart filmmaker. When she was talking about the history, the conflicted history of Barbie, and there is an absolutely conflicted history of Barbie, that there are many parallel stories. But one of the things that I thought of watching, when I was watching this, and I should say right at the beginning, I really enjoyed it. You and I saw it together. We laughed at many of the same jokes. We came out with a spring in our step. I think it was a very enjoyable experience. And, there are elements of Toy Story 2, or there are elements of the Pinocchio story. There are, I think, nods towards Josie and the Pussycats, the live action film, which actually wasn't a big hit when it came out, but then became a cult thing after that. I think you can see, echoes of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. I think all those things are in there. But one of the things that I thought of whilst watching it was Todd Haynes' very early underground film, Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, which we've spoken about before, in which the story of Karen Carpenter is told with Barbie dolls. And they're animated, but they're literally animated just below camera level. So it's just people moving the Barbie dolls around. And it sounds like a stupid idea, but in fact, it's a brilliant idea. And what it does is a very, very serious look at her career and the life struggles that she had as a result of her eating disorder, which it ties up with the way in which she is supposed to be, the way in which she is supposed to present, the image that she is meant to conform to. And I mean, I'm a huge Carpenter's fan, and I think Superstar is a really, really brilliant and compassionate film. It's never been officially released because they never cleared the rights, but that is using Barbie as a sort of metaphor. Look, this is what you're meant to look like, and actually trying to look like that is it's not sustainable. And of course, Greta Gerwig said the Barbie doll couldn't stand up and is not life sustainable. Well, actually, weirdly enough, although this is at the other end of the spectrum, I mean, this is a huge, big blockbuster movie that's pink, candy floss, all that sort of stuff. I think there is a weird connection with the Todd Haynes thing, is that they're both dealing with what the image of Barbie is. That on the one hand, there is that whole thing. On the other hand, there is, as she said, that Barbie goes to the moon before women are allowed to have credit cards. And in the Barbie land of the film, Barbies are everything. Barbies are, the novelists, and they're Nobel Prize winners, and they're presidents, and they're blah, 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 blah. So we're in this fantasy world. And then the gag at the beginning, everyone's seen the 2001 trailer. That's actually the beginning of the film. Helen Mirren narrates this thing very sardonically. And then she says, of course, what happened was that Barbie came along, proved that women could be anything, and therefore that solved all the problems of sexism and inequality in the real world. And that is how the Barbie land Barbies believe that's what's going on. And then, as we heard from that clip, Margot Robbie's stereotypical Barbie's heels fall, and she says, well, what's going on? And it turns out that in the real world, somebody's been playing with her, and somehow she's suddenly dealing with anxiety and thoughts of death and the prospect of cellulite, which is the horsemen of the apocalypse. And so in a way that harks back to Enchanted, in which Amy Adams is a fairy tale princess who ends up in New York and, in Central Park. It's a very similar sort of setup. She goes into the real world where she discovers that actually Barbie hasn't solved the problems. In fact, she meets a young woman who says, you've set the cause of feminism back by 50 years, you fascist. Meanwhile, Ryan Gosling's Ken, who is an appendage without an appendage and has spent the whole of his life just waiting for Barbie to notice him, turns up in the real world and realizes that the patriarchy is great.
It's a very funny line when Barbie says, in fact, explains that she and Ken both are without sexual organs.
That's right, exactly.
Which said so matter-of-factly is very funny.
But also the thing that when Ken first discovers the patriarchy, he thinks it means that the world is run by men and horses. It's only later on that he realizes the horses aren't in control. Anyway, so that conceit is a smart, clever conceit Now, obviously, the Barbie movie had been in development for ages. There was a previous incarnation that Anne Hathaway was down to do, and then that didn't happen because it went from Sony to Warner's. And then I think Margot Robbie is perfect for this role. Obviously, she's a producer, as you said there. She's so perfect that there's even a gag in the narration about how perfect she is for the role that the film gets away with because it's such a perfect role. And I think that the smartness of it is that it manages to have its cake and eat it. It manages to celebrate and satirize and deconstruct the Barbie, mythology. And at the end of it, you come out actually feeling warm towards it. And I say that as somebody who is a huge fan of the Todd Haynes film, which is absolutely about the problems of the way in which, the Barbieization of the real world has lethal consequences. I think a lot of people have talked about how funny Ryan Gosling is, and Ryan Gosling is really funny.
I mean, the sequence where, when you go and see it, there's a sequence where it's a very brief scene where he is talking to a doctor, and he's assuming that he can also become a doctor because he's a man. Is very, very funny.
Because he's discovered the patriarchy. And the sequence in which men then decide that they want, sit down and I'll play my guitar at you. The use of the word at is really great. But I think it's easy to understate how good Margot Robbie is. Yes, Ryan Gosling is great. And I've seen a couple of reviews said, Ryan Gosling steals it. No, he's very good. But the film works because Margot Robbie is absolutely on it in that role. And having the smarts to get on Greta Gerwig, and obviously, as you said, the script with Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, I thought was meta in exactly the way that you want that kind of script to be meta. I thought it was funny. I enjoyed the songs. I mean, I've enjoyed the songs very much. I thought the design was absolutely terrific. I mean, you come out, your retinas are everything's gone pink. There are loads of cinematic gags. There are loads of things, jokes about The Godfather and jokes about
and in that clip was a Matrix joke.
There's a Matrix joke. Exactly. There's the red pill stuff. There's the thing about the Justice League director's cut. But the thing is, when you ask who's it for, it's not one of those movies that goes, it's one thing, a movie critic going, well, I really like it because actually it's got all these really smart references to The Godfather and all that sort of stuff. Okay, fine. But I can imagine it playing to exactly the same people that like Barbie Swan Lake because it's, because it's fun and it's just on the right side of some of the humor. It just slides right up to the edge of what you can get away with and still be a kind of mainstream movie. I was really pleasantly impressed and surprised. I laughed and you and I both came out, I think, with a spring in us, with our arches lifted.
I went out and bought some pink carpet for the house.
Yeah, I know. I saw the picture that you took of the Greta Gerwig thing with all the balloons, and you said, "Where is this?" And somebody put, "It's Mark's house."
Yes, exactly right.
So, what was your feeling?
Oh, I thought it was terrific. I did, cake and eat it is exactly the right phrase.
Yeah.
And if you have all kinds of problems for very good reasons about Barbie, go see the film.
Yeah,
you'll still have a good time.
That's why I say that Mattel should absolutely love it, because what they've done is they've sort of saved the film. They've sort of saved the image of Barbie for the next generation, which is a really smart thing to have pulled off.
That's the ads in a minute, Mark. But first, it's time to step confidently and boldly and with precision into our laughter lift.
I regret
that. Well, some bittersweet news from Showbiz North London. Do you remember, for the purposes of this joke, that I told you about our friends whose daughter, who was 3 months pregnant at the time, suddenly fell into a coma?
Okay.
Well, last week she woke up. My baby, where's my baby?" she cried when she woke up. "Fear not," said the doc. "You had twins, a boy and a girl. They're both absolutely fine. And your brother named them for you." "My brother," said the woman, "he doesn't have both oars in the water at the best of times. What did that idiot name them?" "Well," said the doctor, "the girl is named Denise." "Oh, well, that's not too bad. What about the boy?" "He's called Denephew."
That was a really long setup for what was a very, very poor joke.
Not as bad as Cousin Cecil. He's got 2 boys, 4 and 6. Those are much worse names. Very uninventive. Bad news about the dog, Mark, though. Still, swallowed a whole bag of Scrabble tiles, and he's at the vet's now.
Go on.
No word yet. Anyway, what's to come? It's Oppenheimer. There you go. I know what's to go.
Yes.
It's going to be Oppenheimer.
I was just laughing at the one funny joke in the laughter lift this week.
Back after this, unless you're a Vanguardista, in which case we have just one question. I have cities but no houses. I have mountains but no trees. I have water but no fish. What am I?
I have no idea.
You have to wait. You might have noticed that as well as Barbie, there is a new Chris Nolan film available to go and see, starring Cillian Murphy. It is called Oppenheimer, and here we go.
Yes, so the new film by Christopher Nolan, I mean, just in case, so Christopher Nolan, Memento, Prestige, Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet. I mean, a fairly spectacular run of films. This is nominally a biopic of J. Robert Oppenheimer, played by Cillian Murphy, who obviously has been in several Chris Nolan films before. Oppenheimer, known as the father of the atomic bomb, whom history is recorded as being famously conflicted about his most infamous creation. This is based on the book American Prometheus, which is his story. Although I think, exactly what defines a biopic nowadays is kind of weird. It's like there has become this thing about just last name, Oppenheimer, Lincoln, whatever it is. Anyway, so again, if you don't know, and I imagine most people do, he was in charge of the Manhattan Project, which was the development of the atomic bomb at Los Alamos, in which they basically built a scratch community to bring people together to make an atomic bomb during World War II, whilst also keeping it secret. We have a clip, but it's more of a promotional trailer, but it gives you a sense of the film. Here we go.
Good to know Jason Bourne is also in on the case.
He is,
make
absolutely.
us all safe.
Just in case. That thing about let's go recruit some scientists, it's a big leap on from Bruce Willis in Armageddon saying, let's go drill some holes, isn't it? So after the war, Lewis Strauss offered Oppenheimer a job as director of the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, and then he chaired the advisory of the Atomic Energy Committee. And Oppenheimer, this is all history, this isn't plot spoilers, and because the film is told by Chris Nolan in a non-linear way.
No.
Yes.
Really?
He lobbied for control of nuclear power. Having been basically the father of the bomb, he immediately became lobbying for control of it. He opposed the explosion of the H-bomb on the grounds that it would just promote the arms race. In the 1950s, 1954, his Q security clearance, high security clearance, was in danger. He was subject to hearings and investigations about his alleged communist sympathies from before and his opposition to the arms race. Those hearings instigated by Strauss, who had taken against him, had set the FBI on him. And then in 1958, Eisenhower offers Strauss the Secretary of Commerce, and that then has to go to a Senate hearing. So what the film does is it juggles several timeframes. They are the early life in academia, Oppenheimer's recruitment by Leslie Groves, who we just saw there, played by Matt Damon, who is the person who gets him in to head up the Manhattan Project, the development of the bomb leading up to the Trinity test, and then, of course, to the actual use of it, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Then, 1954, the Atomic Energy Committee Personnel Security Board hearings, in which Oppenheimer is basically accused of, not being a loyal citizen. And then the Senate hearings to confirm Strauss, played by Robert Downey Jr., and the opposition to his appointment, partly by scientists who thought that Oppenheimer had been treated badly. So there's a wide smorgasbord of stuff going on in there. Even as I was just saying that, I realized that
that trailer doesn't really even begin to tell the story.
No. And we also get glimpses of his personal life, his relationships with Jean Tatlock, played by Florence Pugh, and Kitty Oppenheimer, played by Emily Blunt. And there is an enigmatic encounter with Albert Einstein, played by Tom Conti. The cast also includes Matthew Modine, Rami Malek, Josh Hartnett, Kenneth Branagh, Benny Safdie, Gary Oldman, Uncle Tom Cobley, and all. So the first thing to say about it is that Cillian Murphy is brilliant. If Cillian Murphy doesn't get Oscar nominated, I will eat my hat.
Your hat is already in trouble.
My hat is already in trouble. Yeah, this is the Werner Herzog eats his shoe. It is a brilliant performance. And the reason it's brilliant is because, do you remember that there was a photograph taken of Cillian Murphy when you and I interviewed him about Inception? And it was taken outside one of the broadcast buildings.
Yes.
Yeah. And it looked like we were a couple and he was our child because he's...
Yeah, I thought he's with his two favourite uncles.
Two favourite uncles,
yes.
Right, okay. Because he is he's diminutive. And then in that scene in which you see him with Matt Damon, who's all, kind of big and bullish and military, the thing is that obviously the central thing with Oppenheimer, apart from just the development of the bomb, is the stuff that's going on with Oppenheimer himself. And in his face, which, bear in mind, this is shot in IMAX cameras, big close-ups on faces. In his face, where the story plays out, you see ambition, you see conflict, you see devotion, you see deception, you see deceit, you see disappointment. All of those things happen on Cillian Murphy's face. And I think his role is brilliant. My favourite scenes in the film are actually between him and Damon, because they're chalk and cheese characters. And it's in that tension between what the military want and what the scientific community want. There is agreement, but there is also disagreement. What you get, one searching, one demanding, one exploring, one exploiting, and not necessarily always the way you'd think. Obviously, also the film looks great. Hoyt van Hoytema has shot it in a way which is using the IMAX format to do close, to do intimate, to do not just, because it's actually, for a film that's about the invention of the atomic bomb, the spectacle is kind of limited. There's a lot of people talking in rooms, and there's an awful lot of that. And then there's this thing about going from black and white to color, which is sort of subjective, objective, sort of one perspective, one character with another character. Sometimes it seems like it can be style for the sake of style. I'm not entirely sure about how that works, but you kind of, it looks good, and the sound design is fantastic. There is this sort of repetitive thing about the feet stamping on the floor as applause, which then matches into the sound of a rumble and the sound of the earth kind of being almost knocked off its axis by what's happening. There's also kind of quite complex discussions about discussions of why would you drop the bomb in the first place, because the war is it's at its end. It hit Germany. This is okay. Why would you do it? And then more importantly, why would you do it twice? And the idea is you do it once and then you do it twice to demonstrate that you can do it twice. And there's the whole stuff about, how Nagasaki was chosen and then the moral implications of that. And that's then, Oppenheimer immediately becoming somebody who believes that what you have to do is be open about all your scientific exploration, but also you have to limit what's going on in the world. Otherwise, you'll get proliferation of arms races and unleash great horror upon the world. He famously, went to the president and said, "I have blood on my hands," and the president gave him very, very short shrift. So what you get is the thing which is famously quoted, "I'm become death destroyer of worlds." I think what you don't get, and I think what I expected, was the sort of the shock of having done it, of having created the atomic weapon, which is then so monstrous. There is no other word. Whether it's just so monstrous. The kind of how that feels internally, actually, because what the film does is it becomes more interested in how he is treated. After the bomb, it's really more interested in how he is blacklisted and how the forces that were once aligned with him turn against him. And it becomes quite a sort of dense and at times complicated, and I'll be honest, at times confusing intercutting of hearings. One hearing taking place in a small room, one hearing taking place in a big Senate auditorium. But there's a lot of stuff to grapple with. There's a lot of history, and as with Nolan, the way you would research this is that you read every single book and you do all of that. So I think it is a really, really good film. I don't know that it emotionally impacted on me as much as I wanted it to. And I have often found that with Nolan, like Interstellar is very, very emotional. But, you can pick holes in the plot, but it is a very, very emotional thump to it. And I think Oppenheimer is really good and really impressive. It is a 3-hour film, it's quite a hard ask for an audience. As I said, there is a lot of people talking in rooms. It is not a lot of action and explosion. And when things happen, it's fleeting, and quite often it's represented by sound rather than visuals. It is a character study, political history, really. And the weight of it rests on Cillian Murphy's face.
I was, of course, supposed to see it, but because of circumstances
beyond our control,
beyond
anyone's control,
I have not been, and I'm not over it like you're not over your exam.
No. I do want you to see it because I want to know what you think.
Okay. I will try and see it by the time we meet again.
Okay.
Right, what's on? This time we have some listeners' correspondence. Send yours, by the way, to correspondence@kermodemayo.com. Here we go.
Hello, fellas. Claire here, film programmer of Exeter Phoenix, Exeter's only independent cinema. This August, we welcome back Exeter's biggest and best outdoor cinema, Big Screen in the Park in Northern Hay Gardens, from the 9th to the 13th of August, with films including E.T., Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Dirty Dancing. Tickets from £5.
Claire, promoting the Exeter Phoenix's exciting outdoor cinema programme this August. Send your 20-second audio trailer and then we'll critique it. Wherever you are in the world, correspondence@kermodemayo.com. That's it for the end of Take One. By the way, did you know about the signed water bottles?
They're available now.
Yes, in the store. And we ship to America.
Wow.
And Australia. And presumably New Zealand.
Everywhere.
Pretty much. This has been a Sony Music Entertainment production. The team, Lily Hamley, Zachy Peltz, Gully Tickell, Bethy Perkin. She's not Bethy Perkin. I added a Y. I don't know. Beth Perkin. Get well soon. Mickey Movies. Hannah Talbot. Simon E. Pooley. Mark, what is your film of the week?
Oppie Barbenheimer. See them both.
Absolutely. Well, take us to Take Two, which is also landed adjacent to this one. Take Three with you on Wednesday. Thank you so much. Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's Take, then check out our social channels.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I would. I have done.
Excellent.